What is up, everybody? Welcome here back to the channel. We're talking a little rookie draft today, and we're going live. I have not gone live in a long time. It's been a while. Been busy with life, but figure let's go live this morning here on a Saturday. Do a little rookie mock draft. We're going to be doing a 12-team Superflex rookie mock, 1.75 tight end premium PPR. So pretty standard with what we do. I know some people on YouTube were asking, like, "Hey, can we get some one quarterbacks?" Not yet. We'll do the one quarterbacks later. You boomers. Right, we're not boomers here. We're gonna be doing some super flex. I don't even think I play in a one quarterback league anymore, but I will do one for you guys out there as we get started going into this. So I'm gonna get started with this. I gotta send an announcement to the people that we're gonna get started here. And again, what I want to do here, and I put it up in our Substack. I talked about it. Drop the questions, right? So we have a first question here. I'm gonna get to that while I get everybody in the chat. So I just took it from our Substack, our premium subscribers over there. Would you trade the 109, 111 for the 104 plus a 26 second? So here's his team, in Superflex, half PPR. He's got Lamar, May, Spears, Brooks, Algier, Rice, Garrett Wilson, Olave, Wicks, and Bowers and McBride. And then he does have extra capital. So he's got the 102, 108, 109, 111, 206. So he's got a lot of capital there. The thing I would say about this is, yes, I would move up. So if I can just move my 109, 111, get in that top 5 pick. So we're going to go through the mock. And the reason why I put this question up first before we get started is because of the question here is like, where do you want to be? Where are those tiers? For me right now, the tiers are 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, right? So you're really looking at that mock of like, hey, if you miss out on Ginty, 102 to 105 is really where you're okay with. I moved back recently from 102 to 105 in a deal, getting Marvin Harrison Jr., and I'm okay with that because I think the players within the 102 to 105 are pretty much in the same tier. And I know Lanny Spot's not there, whatever, but that's just generally speaking where those guys are at. So based on your roster construction, I want as many of the elite assets as I can get, right? So if I can get up into that top 5 tier and I still have the 102 on my team and the 108 where I can still have some flexibility there, yeah, give me that elite asset every time. If I can get up into the 104, I would do that. So that's kind of how I look at that. So as we get started here, you can drop any questions you want. We're going to start the mock right now. Jay Stein's on the clock, so let's hope he doesn't miss his pick. Oh, he got it already. So he took Ashton Ginty. So again, as you're watching and listening, drop any questions in the chat that you have. I know if you're from X, you're over there. I haven't gone live in a while. You can have any questions you want. You want Dynasty questions, rookie questions, whatever. Just pop them in and we'll go. My guy, Big Jim, appreciate you hopping in here, but also kind of being a member of our Patreon, subscriber, Substack, all of that, our Discord. Go check out our Discord, everybody. You can find a link description below. We're running a bunch of specials right now to good guy kind of jump in there. So let's look at the mock. So let's just talk about that as we go through. So pretty chalk first 2 picks. We're seeing Ginty and Hampton kind of go in those ranges. But McMillan, if you look at here, McMillan's kind of going through and sitting there at 105, which that's a little bit lower than what we saw there. Shador, my buddy ain't done yet. Jake Shador. Full disclosure on Jacob, he's a Colorado fan, so you gotta be a little weary about that. But you're gonna have that in your drafts here. Now, as we kind of go through here, obviously it's going to go faster, so I'm going to answer your guys' questions. So don't just know I'll get to them. So just drop them in there, and I'll get to them as we go through it. But just kind of wrapping up the first 6 picks here. So McMillan and then Cam Ward. And I think the big question is going to be, where do those Superflex quarterbacks go? Right now, it looks like Cam's going to the Titans, and I think you have to determine whether or not you think he's going to be a value sitting there. I think at 106, that's a very good value for a starting quarterback that goes first overall in a draft. But I think, right now, many people have Ward over Sanders, right? Many people have that there. And then I think that's a fun part of this mock, and this fun part of this is seeing kind of where these guys go. McMillan going a little later than usual. Then you get the Judkins range. And again, this is tied in Superflex, right? Tied in premium and Superflex. So Warren and Loveland going in the back end. Really, that's where they've been going. And I know when you're looking at just landing spot, I think Warren's getting a little bit more top 10 buzz than Loveland is. So I think that's going to really determine where these guys go. But I like the idea of getting Loveland a little later, depending on where his spot goes. I obviously have Loveland as tight end 1. A lot of people know that just because I love Loveland in terms of what he can bring to the table as a slot guy out there, the tight end position. I think he's more of a receiver. But again, you can't really miss on both those guys. They're good picks in that range. Then you're going to get back here. So, you have Luther Bird and Travis Hunter going 111, 112. And I've said it all offseason. So I stick to my guns here. I say it all offseason. If Hunter is at the back end of my first round, I'm taking his ass every time because dude's just talented. And I think from a receiving standpoint, unless a team comes out and says, "Hey, he's just a cornerback," I don't care. If they leave any door open for him to be a receiver, I'm taking his ass at 112. I think that's great value, right? I think many would take Caleb Johnson, who at 201, but I have to stick to my guns. I can't flip and say, I'm gonna flip on what I said early in the season, easy as the offseason is gone, where I think Hunter is a value at 112. I think Heisman winning trophy wide receiver. He has that skill. I think he's talented enough to play both ways. So yeah, give me Hunter there at the 112. Let me know what you guys think. Those of you watching, appreciate you guys tuning in. What was your favorite pick in that first round? Least favorite pick in that first round? Where do you guys have Sanders, Ward? Just drop them. We'll kind of go through it. As we get into this, Nicholas, yep, please, appreciate you, man. Jay, thanks for setting up the mock. Of course, we got a little Saturday free from the kids. Let's get into the question here. How are you valuing Jordan Mason after the trade in Minnesota? I don't. So the big thing with Jordan, I like Jordan Mason. I think he's fine. I think that he has standalone value right now. I would say he has standalone PPR flex type of value. I like him there. If I could get a second for Jordan Mason, like an early second, I'd probably do that. I think that, if you can kind of pivot off of him, he's more of a hold more than likely just because I think his value shoots up, if Aaron Jones, whatever happens there, if he gets injured, how that looks at. So he's a very solid handcuff, right? But we've seen handcuffs go twofold. Either they're very good or, they kind of just are stuck in the purgatory of running back to land. And so I think you just have to play it by ear. I'd hold right now. If I can get an early second, depending on where the running backs are in the class, I might flip him for that. But I think he's in a hold. Then you wait, and then you pivot on that. If something happens to Jones, you definitely can just take that late first value. Although even last year when we saw it, when CMC went down, there was still like a lot of leagues out there you couldn't get that, right? You could not get that there. So I would probably hold. I'd hold for a better value because it's definitely going to be out there. I think that, especially with the running back market right now, he's still probably valued at his mid floor, right? And I don't think he's valued at his ceiling yet. Let me pull in this pick here. Okay, I'm going to take him just because. Might as well take Isaiah Bond. So that's kind of how I value those guys. And yeah, I would have declined this too. I declined a 2.6 and one quarterback 10 team. So yeah, if you were, someone offered you that for him, I would have declined, especially in a one quarterback. I'm okay with that. I think that in one quarterback early, second though, with the 10 team, I mean, that's okay, but I still want the 201, 202, somewhere in that tier. I think that's where I'm kind of at right there. All right, let's go through the second round here. We got Caleb Johnson going at 201, Matthew Golden at 202. That's a little later than we usually see him there. Trey Harris at 203, Jalen Milroe. It ain't done yet. Just my boy Jacob loves his QBs. Cameron Scattergo going at 205, Jackson Dart 206. So Dart QB4 here. Jaden Higgins at 207, Quinn Ewers 208. I love it. I love that our community here loves their quarterbacks here in Superflex. RJ Harvey at 209. Tyler Shuck, 210. Oh, Christian Williams is going to watch this later. He's going to lose his shit. But at 210, we got the quarterback that's getting a ton of buzz. He's getting late first round buzz. He's also getting early second round buzz. Dylan Sampson at 211. And then I took Mason Taylor at 212 just because I love Mason Taylor. I absolutely love him as a tight end. I think he's going to be a phenomenal draft pick out there, a phenomenal player in the NFL. So I think that is an interesting area. And I think the fun part about this mock is just the quarterbacks. Like when you look in here, thinking of like, where does Milroe go? There's been a lot of buzz about Milroe, kind of where his landing spot's going to be, what value he has out there. I think from a fantasy football perspective, when you're looking at it from just a fantasy perspective, obviously he holds elite upside. When you're thinking of what he can do on the ground, where he gets drafted is going to really matter. But I could definitely see him kind of rising up the boards a little bit, depending on where he goes, right? Now, let me make this pick real fast. I know it makes terrible podcasting. So this is my last pick here, and then we'll kind of go through it all. But again, if you have any questions, drop them there. I think, drop them in here. I'm going to stay on here for at least 30 minutes as we get questions, as I go over the board, kind of talk to you guys about anything that you want to go over. So, when you're looking at it here, and yeah, I think so too. I think Ewers could have sneaky value at the point of the offseason rise up. I think he can too. I mean, I'm not all against Ewers. Like, I think I mentioned it on the quarters draft podcast that we did. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility where Ewers lands somewhere and, maybe round 3, round 4, round 5 in that range. and finds himself in a very solid spot. And I think if he was injured, like they said last year, I think that brings him a little bit upside in that. The biggest thing with Ewers, and I go back to this all the time, like I watch a lot of Texas games. My brother's a huge Texas fan. And I just like watching Sark call plays. He's one of my favorite, Sarkisian's one of my favorite college football coaches. There was a lot of times when you're watching Texas play with Quinn Ewers where, it looked like Sark didn't trust Ewers to read defenses. And you saw it a couple times. I remember in the playoff, there was an interception that he threw where he yelled like, it was cover 2. And so when you're looking at that, I think the biggest question mark with Ewers is not his physical tools. He has them. He's always had them. Since high school, this dude's had them. I think it's mental, right? And I don't know how to judge that. I'm just some random ass dude that does content, and I love it, and I watch it, but I'm not in the rooms, right? So I think that's the question mark, and that's the one thing we won't know. No one will know. I mean, people can say what they want on social media and Twitter and YouTube and all that, but we don't know what Ewers can do inside that room. And I think that's the question mark, what he can do from defenses there. But he has upside, right? And again, I think the other thing too, this might be a down class for quarterbacks, but we look at how bad some of these quarterbacks we've seen the last couple of years been starting in the NFL, right? I mean, Tommy DeVito out here slinging passes. So I do think that some of these quarterbacks are going to have value. So if you're sitting there and you're on a roster where you have the flexibility to draft some of these guys and just a Q value, I mean, that's not a bad strategy, right? And I think especially like wide receivers are fun, but there's a lot of wide receivers in that second, third, fourth round. We'll get into them here in a minute, where you just don't know, like a lot of wide receiver 3s. Right. So if you look at these, and wide receiver 3s are replaceable. They just are. In fantasy, they just are. So if you take a quarterback instead, if you're looking for that quarterback value, it's not a bad play there. Right. So when we get into this, Tyler Shuck could be a huge value. Could be a huge value there. I just can't get on board with his old ass, but I get it. I understand it, especially if you're talking about with all the draft pundits out there calling him in the first and second round. This is a good question. So I'll go to the third round here in a minute, but what do you think? People just have draft fever, or is this class actually growing on people? I think draft fever is always a buzz right now. I think in March, and as soon as April hits, we're going to start seeing that a little bit. But I think the class as a whole, there's always going to be pieces, right? So I think from a standpoint, I think the running back class as a whole is amazing. Like I think that the running back class, I keep saying this, and people keep DMing me, or they keep we keep talking about it. The running back class has a ton of different groups, a ton of different value from all kinds of different perspectives, right? So you have the 3 down guys, right? So if we go through some of the guys in this list, Travion, 3 down kid, Hampton, Genty, those are 3 down backs. Judkins, maybe. I think he's more in that tweener range. But those first 3 are there. I think Caleb Johnson could be a 3 down guy, depending on where he went. Zone scheme and can catch passes there. Then you have just like the bruisers, the Judkins, even the Scatabo you can put in that category too. Like those guys, early down guys. Giddens, he's an early down guy. Damian Martinez, early down guy, but can do very, very solid work as a first and second down back. Then you have like the pass catching backs, the guys out of the backfield, kind of like, Jaden Blue, Devin Neal, Hunter, like those guys. Dylan Sampson can kind of be a tweener there. So a lot of different unique skill sets. And these guys all are pretty good at pass blocking. Like there's also deficiencies in some of these guys' games from that standpoint, but they've all kind of learned how to pass block. And I think they're very skilled. So I think that's where the class grows on people early. Like, hey, that running back class is skilled there. And then you're always going to fall in love with that wide receiver, right? The Jack Becks of the world, the Jalen Royals, those type of guys. But I think the class as a whole is better because the running backs are so good. And I went on a podcast, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago. I talked about the running back class, and people were asking, how many running backs do you see getting drafted in that first or second round? Day 1, day 2 picks. And I think at that time, I put the over 7.5. I think I might have been low, right? I think we could see some 9.5. Like, I think that we could see maybe Tim Backs taken in those first, day 1, day 2. That's interesting. I think that's where you get that value at too. All right, let's get to this question here. In a startup 208 rookie pick, Russ would be third quarterback, Brian Robinson or Mooney. Who's the best value here? So I don't want Russ. I'm out on Russ there. Brian or Mooney? I actually think Washington's in the market to get a running back. Mooney, he's okay, but I also think Falcons are in a market for maybe possibly getting a wide receiver. I'd take the pick. When you're looking at who's on the board here, I think there's running backs that are kind of can replace Brian Robinson's value. I think that there's some guys here, just looking at this board, Harvey, Sampson, okay, Neal, those type of guys, Tootin, sitting there at 307. That's pretty good value there. I think if you can get the rookie pick, you have more flexibility of after you do your startup, seeing where your needs are, and you can either move that pick, you could draft a player for that need. If you take Russ immediately, that's like buying a used car. That's like buying Body Blue, to be honest with you, right? Like he's just been used up, not a ton of value going to happen there. Brian Robinson is the other one. I would take 208 to Brian Robinson. I've been a big Brian Robinson guy. There's a guy I think he's undervalued in startups. But right now, just because I think the way that roster's built, we saw Eckler kind of take over that role as a pass catcher. I'd probably lean the 208 just based on flexibility. That's kind of where I'd be at there with them. All right, let me get into this. Did I miss the answer for Howard and McCord? No, I haven't gotten to that. So let's get into that. You asked the question up here. So who do you think is a better Devy Dynasty asset, Will Howard or Kyle McCord? So this is a tough one. I think McCord is a better passer, but I think Will Howard is a better player. So I think coaches will like the idea of Will Howard being a starter, where I could see McCord coming in and just slinging it, right? Just kind of having those big numbers there. I would probably lean Howard, barely. Who would I draft? I would draft Will Howard over Kyle McCord in a rookie draft right now. I would definitely prioritize Kyle McCord as a free agent pickup afterwards. But I would probably lean Howard more. He's getting a ton of buzz out there. And you know what? As much as I hate Ohio State, you got to give him credit for what he did in that playoff. He looked very good in that playoff. He was kind of, he definitely led that team. Obviously, he had Jeremiah Smith. He's got a Mecca. He's got all the weapons that you need there. But I would lean Will Howard just based on intangibles, based on, I think, a coaching staff could see him and be like, yeah, that guy could lead our team at least for a few games. Kyle just slings it, and I think he can make too many. I think the big thing with him is his decision making too many errant throws, those type of issues there. All right, let's wrap up a couple of these questions. Then we'll get to, we'll just start it here. John McGlynn, what's up, John? Appreciate you. Been getting Arroyo at 301, but post NFL draft, that will probably change if he goes in round 2. Yeah, so we can talk about Arroyo because he went at 302 here. So this is a good segue here. I don't think John knows how to segue, but we appreciate you there. So yeah, Arroyo's a very interesting. So when I was looking at tight ends there in the end of the second, I took Mason Taylor. Arroyo has all the physical tools, right? I think the injury concerns is the biggest thing that he had in college. He's an older prospect too, but if he does go round 2, which he definitely can, I think that I know a lot of people are kind of pegging the Colts possibly as a tight end spot. I know all of that, but I could see the Colts waiting to round 2 and into sneaky, right? Whoever they drafted tight end is one of those ones like, hey, he could have a role there. I could easily see an Arroyo be that guy just because of, Raz, relative athletic score. I think teams are going to like his versatility. That's going to pop him back up into the second round. And so you're 100% correct there. And then when you're looking through the third round, I think the interesting part in this is like Elegamaner going at the beginning of the third there, Stanford guy. Noel, I love that pick at 303. That's a very solid pick. I think Jalen Noel is versatile. I think in my NFL draft mock we talked about it. I had him go to the Falcons. Or I know it was somewhere else. I forget where I had it. But I had him going somewhere where they already had a slot guy. Oh no, Seahawks. I had him going to the Seahawks. So they have Cooper now, then they got JSN, and then it's like, hey, maybe they can get a guy like Noel later, put him out wide, and then kind of just let him go out there and dominate. Because I think with Noel's profile, he can do both. I think he can be in a slot, but he's physical and big enough to get on the outside, right? He's undersized a little bit for the outside X, but he still is able to kind of produce there. And I think it'd be interesting to see where he goes in a scheme-wise, but I love that pick there. The Devin Neal pick is great. Harold Fannin, he just can't block. I mean, he just cannot block. And he can produce. He can be a receiver there. But he is, Christian talked about it on the show. He's Isaiah Likely. And that's okay. Isaiah Likely's fine. But I think we were seeing like tight end 1 buzz, first round buzz, and we're just not seeing that anymore. Ollie Gordon at 306. That's, Ollie Gordon's Ollie Gordon. Tootin going at 307 is great value. I think that's a really good pick there. Restropro going at 308. Jack Beck, DJ Giddens, very solid value sitting there at 310. Jalen Royals 311. I took Isaiah Bond at 312 just because I can't let him drop that far. I do think he's still talented, but his big thing is just here. He's a Pickens type player where, he has physical tools, but the mental aspect of it, he's just not as talented as George Pickens is. He's definitely like A.D. Mitchell, and that's a lazy ass comp because it's Texas, but that's really where I'm looking at there in terms of that. So that's the third round. I think my favorite pick was Jalen Noel. I like the Tootin pick as well. Giddens pick, late third. That's a great back. 1,500 yards from scrimmage this last year. Very solid guy, 3-down guy, possibly early down for sure. Can catch a little bit, does have some receiving upside there. So I like the Giddens pick there. I like the value that you're seeing there. All right, let's get to some other questions here as we go through here. How do you feel about trading a 26 first of a stack team for the 202 this year? I would not make that deal until we're close to on the clock. I think it really just kind of depends. Like, let's say this. Would I trade a 26 first that's probably going to be late for Matthew Golden? Yes, I would, right? Like if I'm sitting there at 202 or Caleb Johnson, 100%, right? I just don't know if we can definitively say some of those guys will be there. And there is a tier, right? Like you could see if some of these guys get bad landing spot. If Luther Burden doesn't go to round 2, round 3, and he slips, maybe Luther's sitting there. Maybe you would make that deal, right? I think the question is who is in the back end of the 26 first next year. So when we think of the 26 class, now I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I might miss some guys. Arch Manning could be in there, right? So we're thinking the quarterbacks. Drew Aller's probably going to be in there. And then who else is going to be there, right? It's from the quarterback spot. Is it Sellers, Lenoris, whatever? So maybe you're going to see that. So you might have some more quarterbacks pushing some talent down. Running backs are very good. Running backs, Love, Darius Taylor. There's a bunch of guys in there that you could say, hey, could definitely kind of go up there. Singleton's up there. There's some of those other. Justice Haynes might bounce back from Michigan. So there's a lot of other running backs that can be in there. I think the question is that wide receiver spot because a lot of unknowns in that wide receiver spot. Jordan Tyson at Arizona State, Carnell Tate at Ohio State. And there's a lot of iffies, right? Zachariah Branch over at Georgia now. There's a lot of guys in that wide receiver class, and we've talked about it on the pod, that just haven't shown up yet. So if they do, then I think that 26 first gets a little bit more valuable, right? Because if they push that area down, even if it's a late first, you probably would take some of those guys over a Matthew Golden or whoever. I have a feeling Matthew will pop himself into the first round at some point. I think Caleb's going to pop himself in. If I looked at this board right now and would say, okay, whose spot are they going to take? I could see Luther falling out of the first round. If someone said that Hunter was as a quarterback only, obviously he would fall out. But let's say for this purpose, he's going to be a wide receiver. He would stay in there. I could see also like a Egbuka or a Loveland, right? If Loveland doesn't get the capital someone likes or the landing spot that someone likes, Egbuka, I've seen him mock to the Packers a lot. Maybe people wouldn't like the competition there. So I could see those guys flipping. But I still think I take a 26, I take the player, an Egbuka, a Bird, and a Hunter, even a Golden or Johnson over that first. So I don't mind it. I just think it's risky. It depends on your league, how your league mates operate. You might be able to make that deal later after the draft. I'm okay with that, but it's a little bit too much risk for me right now to make that deal just based on we don't know the landing spot. Are you a Drake May guy? Yeah, I like Drake May. In a Superflex trade discussion, trying to get Gibbs in a May deal. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. If you come in and May is your QB3, I'm totally okay with you trying to get Gibbs. And if you have two very top 15 quarterbacks, that's fine. But you need to get some back in return. Like you need to get definitely some capital back because I think May, he might not be getting value this on like those sites out there, Keep Trade Cut, those type of things. But I do think May is going to push himself up in the top 5 quarterback territory in some Dynasty at a certain point. I think he has that upside. I think he's getting valued in the 5 to 10 range in a real league, right? Not like rankings, just in a real league. If you have Drake May, I think you are looking at a QB 10-ish valuation. So if I'm moving him, I want some considerable return back, right? All right, let's go through the 4th round. And again, if you just hopped in, I see a bunch of you guys watching. You can drop any of your questions here. Just doing a little live Q&A, probably for the next 10-ish minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. You can drop any questions you have. It can be Dynasty trade questions. Devy, I know not a lot of people do Devy anymore. I'm one of the relics. But if you want to kind of talk about some Devy questions you have, anything, drop them in there. Or any questions. I can do live questions today too. All right, let's go to 401. Let's go through the 4th round here and go through it. Damian Martinez at 401, Miami running back. Terrence Ferguson at 402. Very, very solid Oregon tight end. And he's getting a little buzz out there. Tom McShay's talked about him as being one of his favorite tight ends in the class. So that's a pretty good value there. Rashard Smith has always been my guy. I love the dude, but he's getting a little pricey for me. I'm not shocked to see Real McShay take him there in that spot. Torrey Horton is there. Jaden Blue is an interesting one, man. One of the one of the more quick backs out there, receiving guy. He's definitely, though, a three down guy, or excuse me, a third down back. So for me, that's going to limit his upside. Fourth round's pretty good value for him. Jordan James, another one, Oregon guy, hasn't really panned out so much right now in the offseason. We'll see what happens there as we kind of get closer to the draft where he goes. Ty Felton, I ranked him pretty high in my wide receiver show. I think that's good value at 407. That's fun value there in that range. Quinn Allen's getting a little bit of love. Will Howard, we talked about him recently. Dyke getting in there. I like some Dyke going at 410. Jarquez Hunter led the SEC in rushing last year. Very solid back. So I had some questions in another Discord I'm in from some good guys over there, and they were asking me. They were like, "Hey, what do you think of Hunter?" And the thing that comes to mind with Hunter always to me is very solid at all aspects of the game, right? Very good, probably above average pass blocker, can make guys miss, above average kind of acceleration, above average break tackle ability, just above average back. But he doesn't really excel at any one particular area, right? He's not going to be a 4-3 guy. He's not going to be an elite pass catcher. He's not an elite blocker. He's just a dude. But I could see a guy like Jarquez Hunter just performing well, right? Just being a solid guy in an offense, kind of that running back 2 type area. So you can get him late. That's great. I took Raheem Sanders too. I was a hater, man. You could call me a hater all you want, like Raheem Sanders 2 years ago. Then he bounced back this year. And I think that, I think teams are going to like him. I've been seeing a little bit of buzz from, some analysts out there that kind of jumping on the Raheem Sanders train. And when he went to South Carolina this last year, 881 yards and 11 touchdowns, but his receiving game was pretty good. He had over 300 yards receiving, and he averaged about 11 yards per catch. Like, he definitely showed some promise there. I think teams are going to like him. Like, I really like when you're looking at him. And that's a fun late round pick. Raheem Sanders is a fun late round pick because his freshman year, he was probably the best freshman in college football from the running back standpoint. Him and TreVeyon Henderson were right there. And then, obviously didn't pan out too much. His freshman and sophomore year were, when you're looking at it, were good. And then his junior year just fell off the map. He was injured. He was overweight. He hit 245, 250, but he bounced back. He looks really good right now. So that's some value there. All right, let's get into like who's on the board still. Some guys to kind of think about as you go through. I'm going to kind of go through them off the cuff here. But, Gunnar Helm's still out there. Tez Johnson did not get drafted here, probably because he's like 135 pounds. When you're looking at here, McCoy still on the board. Woody Marks, USC running back. He's kind of a Jarquez Hunter kind of clone a little bit there. Savion Williams, right? Everybody, when you're looking at him and what he can do, everybody's calling him the next Cordell Patterson, right? So that's kind of what they're mentioning in there with him. He's still on the board. I think that would be an interesting pick there. Gadsden, problem with him, Arande, is he's just a tweener. He's not really a tight end. He's not great enough to be a wide receiver. Brew McCoy's dead an asset, in my opinion. Donovan Edwards, RIP Donovan Edwards, you're my guy, but I just don't see it. Nick Nash, I think, is the one that's interesting. There's 2 wide receivers that I want to talk about. Nick Nash, San Jose State. I understand he's an older prospect, but dude, he balled out in college. Now, I don't know what his draft capital is going to be like. I do think he'll be like 5th, 6th round guy, but he's one to watch. I like his profile. I'm seeing some Puka, comps. Don't do that. No one's Puka. And then when you're looking at the other guy I want to mention, Kobe Hudson, interesting UCF wide receiver. I liked him in college. Kobe can play, and Kobe Hudson's one of those guys I think you should be aware of, undrafted, free agent kind of pickup guy. And again, when we're talking about these guys, we're talking, dart throws, right? So understand that. I'm not talking Kobe Hudson's going to be a burner and a league winner. But Kobe Hudson, to me, is a guy that, I would take at 410. I would take over Dyke. I think that he showed elite, no, I wouldn't say elite production, but he showed consistent production. He just never really popped off in college. Like, when you're thinking of what Kobe did, he came into Auburn as a very, very, hotly sought out recruit. Didn't really produce there too much, but at UCF the last 3 years, pretty solid. He averaged about 44 catches, 750, 800 yards, and he scored touchdowns. He had 19 touchdowns in 3 years. So Kobe to me is just one of those guys, just a solid prospects out there going through there. All right, let's get into some questions. And if you guys got some questions, drop them. I'm going to get out of here in 5-10 minutes if you don't have it. How many tight ends are worth drafting this class, in your opinion? Well, I think, in my opinion, all 6 on this board are worth drafting. I think that I would take those 6. Now, where's the value? If I had to avoid anyone based on their value, I don't mind skipping Fan in there and Arroyo to take Ferguson in the fourth, right? So like if I don't have to, if I can take someone else in the third round and still get Ferguson in the fourth, I'm okay with that. I think Warren and Loveland are the two only first round guys that I would do there. Mason and Mason Taylor's probably the only guy that I'd be willing to reach on in the late second. That's probably as early as I was taking him at 212 there. I like all six of these guys, but if I had to, dumb it down a little bit in terms of just value wise, I think Warren, Loveland, Taylor, and Ferguson is where I'm like, yeah, based on their perceived value now. But we know these values are going to shift landing spot wise. But I'm just, Fan is one of those ones, and even Arroyo, based on the injury history there, I get a little concerned about. I'm just going to avoid them if they're still going that second to third round. Here's another one. Do you think Golden would be a pick to get it at the 103? A pick to get at the 103. Well, I mean, yeah, he's going to be there, right? If you're asking if he's going to be there at 103, he's definitely going to be there. I wouldn't draft him that high. I don't think you need to. I do think that there's some guys that really think he's wide receiver one, right? So maybe that, if you're mentioning that, if he goes, there's always a possibility. We saw Ruggs. We saw these guys get drafted ahead of CeeDee Lamb. So there's always a possibility someone believes in Golden, takes him in front of Tet. Then I think he does get his value shifted up a little bit. But it'd be hard for me to see him go before 105, where Tet went in this, or 106. So that's because I just think that the quarterbacks will push themselves up. I think running back landing spots will push themselves up. And if that did happen, I could see Golden just going 106, Tet 107, maybe in certain drafts, right? But I think he's there. I think he could be there at 103. I would not pick him. I would just trade back a little bit and then just try to get back in that territory tier where I could draft him again and get that extra capital. I use Dynasty Labs for startup ADP. I know it's different from most. Yeah. It's completely different, and that's why it's a great tool. But I think that rankings. So startup ADP, what I would do is what I do with Dynasty Labs, and I wrote about this too. You take Dynasty Labs ADP, and then you take rankings, right? You can create a tier list based on that. So so what I would do is take your rankings, if you have rankings or whoever's rankings you trust, right? So let's say I take my rankings here, and then I have Dynasty Lab ADP over on this side. Essentially, you can assign tiers. I create another duplicate of my rankings, and I basically block out the tiers of when I know guys. So a lot of guys use Dynasty Lab ADP. That's what a lot of managers are doing right now, using that. So you can be ahead of that. If you feel like a tier is coming up, just draft that guy beforehand and use that value-wise there. I think the reason why rankings differ from ADP is because rankings are really taking into like a very vacuum of value, right? Looking at trade value, looking at perceived value, looking at all of those things, and then trying to say, hey, and also here's the other thing. And Leo Pasiga, we used to do a Dynasty show together till he retired. I don't know what he's doing. Old man, he should be coming back and hanging out with me. He always talked about this too. When you're talking about startup ADP, it's entirely different because they're looking at how they're roster building. They're looking at kind of how getting these guys. So a lot of managers looking at roster building perspective of how to team build. And that's why you're seeing ADP of guys different than rankings, because after the ADP is over, then the rankings shift based on kind of what that perceived value of that player is in a vacuum in that one area. Rankings don't look at team builds. So it's a really different kind of context there. So there's definitely a differentiation between two. So how do you differentiate between the two? I just look for value, right? So if I have both up, I'm just going to say, okay, that's that Dynasty ADP. I know where these guys are going at. But if I have my rankings, so if my rankings are higher on a guy, I'm okay moving up and getting them, but I at least know where other people are going to draft that guy. So that's kind of how I use it. Is like, hey, I know managers that just pull up Dynasty Lab ADP. They go on the queue and they just put up their queue that way. They just literally blanket market so they can see who's their next guy, because people don't want to reach and not reach on players. But if I know when a player is going to get drafted, if my rankings and my tiers are different, I can get them beforehand, right? That's kind of how I would look at it and then use it. But I would also use Dynasty ADP for trade values, right? If a guy like, I don't know, T. Higgins or someone's getting drafted extremely high in Dynasty Data ADP, I'm going to use that advantage into me in my real leagues and see what Higgins' market is in my real league. That's kind of how I look at it. Hopefully that explains it. Yeah, I know. But that's how I would look at it too. Yeah, team building, essentially. Like I would say team building is the Dynasty Ladder ADP. Rankings are essentially just, hey, what is this value? What is this trade from there? So that's a rookie mock. You know, if you guys got some questions, I'll jump in and answer a couple more, or not. I'll get out of here. We are doing so. Me and Christian Williams, in our past life when we worked for a different company, we started what we called the rookie guide. It happened 2 years ago. We did our first 2 for the company there, and I think our first one got over a lot of downloads. I forget what the exact number was, but we were very humbled by that. Last year, we expanded on that, got even better numbers. And then this year, what we decided to do, obviously, we're working on our own brand now. We're going to be doing our rookie guide again. So we usually did 3 versions of it the previous 3 years or 2 years. This year, we're just doing 1. So we've been working on that probably since January. Same great, content, same great model, same great design, guide, everything there. And we're going to be dropping that right after the draft. So that's going to be for everybody out there. We're going to sell it by itself, but we're going to be also selling it through our Patreon. So if you just sign up for the Patreon, you'll get it. It's $5. It's underneath here in the description, or the Substack. But if you sign up for the Patreon, you get everything. Substack, guide, all of that stuff's there. So go check that out. So would you take it to 103? I would take Hampton or Henderson. So to me right now, it's coming down to Genty. If Tet still goes 102, which I don't think is going to happen, I think a running back's going to go there. Right now, I'm looking at Genty, Hampton, Henderson are my top 3 values, right? McMillan's in there. If McMillan goes top 10, he'd be right there. But I would take one of those 4. That's kind of where I'm at. But to me, I think Hampton and Henderson are great values in that spot, and I would definitely lean in that pick there. Yeah, you'll get it. You'll get a big deal. You just because you're in there already, you're going to get it dropped as soon as it comes out. Our hope is for the rookie draft guide to get it out that Sunday/Monday to get it out as early as we can for you guys. We're going to be working all night after the landing spots come out, kind of determining where that's at, where our rankings are, and everything there. So, all right. Well, hey, I appreciate you guys hopping in with me early on a Saturday, depending on where you're at. Out here in California, it's 8 a.m. Just want to jump in. I'll probably do a little bit more lives as we go on the weekend, just as we kind of do it there. Go check out our Patreon. Go check out our Discord. We're always chatting in there. We have a great group of guys in there. If you sign up for the Substack, you get free access to our Discord as well. And I can't say enough about my community our community. My bad. Our community that we've been able to cultivate. We have a great group of amazing guys in there that are just awesome people. So thank you guys for subscribing to us. We'll see you guys next time.